Hi everyone, welcome back to My Left Eye. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has declared after an assessment that Gaza's 2 million people are experiencing severe levels of acute food insecurity, and this is the first time that an entire population has been so classified. The situation in southern Palestine has become increasingly dire over recent weeks, and now it seems that the entire population is either starving or under severe risk of starvation. This is the first time such an assessment has been made in any country around the world in the entirety of history. Despite the mounting evidence, including pictures and video footage too graphic to show here on YouTube, the Israeli propaganda machine continues to insist that enough food is being allowed through into Gaza. Although the facts say otherwise, this hasn't prevented Israel from sending out a stream of people onto news shows to try and argue the contrary. That includes this shite hawk who recently appeared on BBC's Question Time to try and push a pro-Israeli agenda to a dumbfounded panel and audience who were aghast at the claims being made by the Israeli representative, whose efforts included trying to claim that old pictures taken of Gaza had in fact been taken recently and that there was no problem with getting food through to southern Palestine. More on that shortly, but we're going to first take a quick skim through this article. Let's see what's happening. So here we can see in this BBC article, Gaza's entire population facing acute food insecurity. Blinken warns. Gaza's 2 million people are experiencing severe levels of acute food insecurity, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said. This was the first time an entire population has been so classified, he said when questioned by the BBC about conditions in the territory. Mr. Blinken called on Israel to prioritise providing for those in need. UN agencies have said North Gaza could face famine by May without a pause in the fighting and surge in aid. Mr. Blinken's warning came during a trip to the Philippines as US officials announced that he would travel to the Middle East, his sixth trip to the region since October, as efforts to secure a ceasefire continue. Unfortunately, again, it looks as though Israel will not be attending the latest round of ceasefire talks. It's also very ironic that Blinken is making these claims given how closely allied the United States and Israel have been in the past. The United States are still providing money and military aid to the state of Israel. Also, several times in the past, they have allied with Israel when voting in UN Security Councils on a two-state solution and whether Palestine should be recognised as a state in its own right. Asked by the BBC whether the current conditions were a harbinger of the territory's future without an agreed governance or security plan, he said, quote, "According to the most respected measure of these things, 100% of the population of Gaza is at severe levels of acute food insecurity. That's the first time an entire population has been so classified. Acute food insecurity is when a person's inability to consume adequate food puts their life or livelihood in immediate danger. If unaddressed, it leads to starvation." Mr. Blinken added, "We also see again, according to this case, the United Nations, 100% the totality of the population is in need of humanitarian assistance. Compare that to Sudan, around 80% of the population there is in need of humanitarian assistance. Afghanistan, about 70%. So again, this only underscores both the urgency, the imperative of making this a priority. He once again called on Hamas to lay down arms, but said it was incumbent on Israel to make it a priority to provide for those who desperately need humanitarian assistance. Of course, the United States have said that they're setting up a temporary port off the coast of Gaza. A lot of people have speculated that this is too little, too late, and would also be used as a front to bring natural resources out of Palestine, natural oil and gas, so there could be a grab for resources underneath the veil of this humanitarian assistance from the United States. United Nations Human Rights Chief Volker Turk put the blame firmly on what he called Israel's extensive restrictions on the entry and distribution of humanitarian aid and commercial goods, displacement of most of the population, as well as the destruction of crucial civilian infrastructure. The restrictions, he warned, may amount to the use of starvation as a method of war, which is a war crime. Israel's diplomatic mission to the United Nations in Geneva said Mr. Turk was seeking to blame it for the situation in Gaza and completely absolve the responsibility of the UN and Hamas. Israel is doing everything it can to flood Gaza with aid, including by land, air and sea, it insisted.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Absolute lies. Of course, we've seen recently convoys being attacked by the IDF. We've also heard some pathetic excuses coming from Israel recently, as well as, of course, the ludicrous claims that members of the United Nations and UNRWA could be part of Hamas as well. That is, as we've seen all too often recently, the latest example of propaganda and lies coming out from Israel. Aid workers have rejected this, saying that much of the problem in northern Gaza is due to the collapse in security around aid convoys after Israel targeted police who were escorting them. Israel has said police had been hit because its military is dismantling Hamas, but the United States has questioned this, saying such targeting makes aid distribution impossible and counterproductive. US officials also announced on Tuesday that Mr. Blinken would make his latest trip to the region since Hamas's attacks on Israel on the 7th of October and the start of the war in Gaza. It comes without a breakthrough so far on a ceasefire for hostage release deal between Israel and Hamas. He will speak with Saudi leaders in Jeddah and then continue on to Cairo to meet the Egyptian leadership. A significant part of the talks will focus on Arab support for a post-war plan to secure and govern Gaza. The Americans want rule by Palestinian Authority, the post-Oslo peace accords entity that lost control in Gaza to Hamas after the elections and fighting 17 years ago. However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly rejected the idea of a PA rule there, one of the many crucial points over the disputes of any so-called day-after plan for Gaza. Mr. Blinken did not address a question about whether an agreed post-war plan for Gaza could move forward with a different Israeli leader. On Monday night, the United States, Joe Biden, told Mr. Netanyahu that his plan to push on with an offensive in Rafah would be a mistake, with more than 1 million Gazan civilians sheltering in the southern border town. In their first conversation in over a month, they also discussed a plan to send an Israeli delegation to Washington next week to discuss both the Rafah plan and a new alternative approach to targeting Hamas there without a major ground invasion. As I mentioned, Melanie Phillips made a desperate effort to try and defend Israel. In a recent appearance on BBC's Question Time, Phillips put up a pathetic effort and also tied herself in knots with contradictory statements. First of all, she tried to claim that enough food was getting through to Gazans, something which Fiona Bruce reminded her contradicts statements made by the United Nations, Amnesty International, the World Health Organization and UNICEF. She also had to remind Phillips that pictures she claimed showed an abundance of food in Gaza didn't have a timestamp and were taken some time ago. When this was pointed out to her, and with the audience obviously not taking in her propaganda and lies, she then tried to blame the United Nations and Hamas themselves for preventing food getting through to southern Gaza. First of all, she claimed that the food wasn't getting through, and then when it was revealed that that was absolute lies, she's then tried to say that food isn't actually getting through to Gaza, but trying to provide scapegoats. Fortunately, though, the general public are becoming more immune to Israel's lies as further revelations about the truth of the matter come into public perception. We'll have to see what the response to this latest news on the famine is, but no doubt, as always, it will be utterly reprehensible and pathetic propaganda. But let us know what you think about that in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. Please hit the subscribe and thumbs up buttons to help us out on the algorithm. We've also now got the membership program open with some great perks for you to enjoy starting from just 99p. Hit the join button or follow the links in the channel description. If you'd like to make a one-off contribution, then please hit super thanks on the video or follow the link to our Buy Me a Coffee page where you can help to show solidarity and support the channel for just the price of a tasty hot beverage. All contributions are greatly appreciated. Thanks again everyone. My left eye will be seeing you soon.